breaking free. Yeah, we're breaking free. No more oppression. It's out for liberty. Breaking free. Yeah, we're taking a stand. Freedom's in our hearts. We're reclaiming our land. They try to silence us, but we won't be tamed. Voices getting louder, can't keep us in chains. We got the power, we got the might. Together we can shine, together we can fight. Feel the rhythm in your feet, it's time to stand tall. Raise your voice and shout, we're breaking down the walls. We're breaking free, yeah, we're breaking free. No more oppression, it's out for liberty. Breaking free, yeah, we're taking a stand. Freedom's in our hearts, we're reclaiming our land. They try to silence us, but we won't be tamed. Voices getting louder, can't keep us in chains. We got the power, we got the might. Together we can shine, together we can fight. Feel the rhythm in your feet, it's time to stand tall. Raise your voice and shout, we're breaking down the walls. We're breaking free, yeah, we're breaking free. No more oppression, it's out for liberty. Breaking free, yeah, we're taking a stand. Freedom's in our hearts, we're reclaiming our land. We're claiming our land.
What is up, y'all?
Hey, good to be here.
Hi, everybody.
Terry.
I went to go repost this on X and it's not on my feed. So I don't know if that means I got canceled or what's going on. But
No, you didn't.
I don't know.
I saw it and I reposted it.
I swear to God, though, go look at my feed. It's not on my feed other than the repost that I just did.
I'm going to do that right now.
Hi, Shorty. Hi, David.
Hey, everybody. Let's see here.
What's up,
This-
Gina?
So many cool people. I cannot see it. There we go.
Gina's got her show now too, so make sure you're following Gina.
Please.
And David is touring the lounges of Holiday Inns in his Partridge Family tribute band. Little known fact that may or may not be true about David is he was the first cut out of the Partridge Family.
Oh, wow. They went with some other guy named David, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was supposed to play Reuben Kincaid.
Oh, wow. Okay. We're going deep into the Gen X memory hole here.
Well, but the funny thing about that joke is that Reuben Kincaid was like 70 years old, so that would make David roughly like 112 right now. So
probably thereabouts.
Oh, perfect.
I like this longevity projection, though. Maybe it would be great if we'd all could like live healthy lives well past 100. That'd be great. Can you imagine what that?
Well, he's gonna outlive me because his shirts are much tighter. He explained this to me on Spaces one night. Man, that I didn't really understand. Yeah, you're not.
I'm not on a see exactly.
You were there. You were in the bus, David.
Come on, get happy. Oh, come on. Exactly. A whole lot of, I don't know the words, but
yeah, there we go.
They're little birds that dance around partridges, right?
Oh, David, you must learn it. Learn it all. Learn it all. I'm not,
no, David,
you
really
know me. I'm not letting this joke go. Not letting this joke go.
Yeah. Here we are again, having fun, liberating our townships.
Right. I don't know. Everything was acting wonky on me. So, how are you tonight?
I'm fantastic. How are you guys? This is kind of a cool change of venue here. I'm actually sitting in the middle of the Surf City Republic, as I'm starting to call it, Huntington Beach, California, at my friend's place, who has far better Wi-Fi apparently. I think I may have to make a habit of this.
Nice.
Yes.
Does anybody call it the HBC?
No, like LBC, but like with HB, no, not really.
I
It's
listened to too much Sublime growing up, so like,
exactly LBC, of course. I mean, you can't literally listen to too much Sublime. But Long Beach is just to the north of here. 2 cities to the north, and I think there's a similar kind of relaxed vibe, to Huntington Beach, but there's also a little more rebelliousness, even more. I mean, because this is the home of the Offspring, if that helps. But the fact is I think Huntington Beach has the potential of being another like I was inspired by that post about the Conch Republic, and I'm seriously going to start the Surf City Republic. So help me, because it could be the same thing. There's a certain similar vibe to Key West out here, that same sort of rebelliousness. So we'll see.
So you're saying the LBC and the HBC, you got to keep them separated?
Exactly. You do have to keep them separated.
Are you talking
I also have no self-esteem.
Kick them out.
Come out and play.
All right. Well, let's pretend this first 5 minutes went well and just move on. And I'll think of something else to say about David as time goes on. I've got more David material, as David knows. So
I'm sure he loves that.
This is too small on my screen. Did I at least get the hand on the face? Did I get this?
Yeah.
Is that what that is? Nice. All right. Terry is in the comments, so please.
Terry.
Hello. Oh, David's not old. He's just a statist.
Wow. See, that's like libertarian swear words again coming out, right? This is all about communication tonight too. So we're gonna learn anyway. Yeah.
I'm training people to call David a statist. So if nothing else,
okay, great. All right. Libertarians. What are we gonna do with ourselves?
Thanks, Terry.
Thank you, Terry.
I still haven't taken this slide out, so it's not New Year anymore. There we go. Township Liberation. That's us.
Yes.
That's the old one. None of this makes any sense. There we go. Terry, make sure you follow Terry Bats T76. This is going really well so far, Mike.
Isn't it though? I mean, as long as we're having fun.
I wish I wouldn't have spent time today writing my Emmy speech because I don't think it's coming through. Please share this if you want to torture your friends with this, or
we're having
your followers, lose some followers, or however that all works.
Get censored, whatever. I don't even know.
This is the old one. This is like broken, and I don't know what's going on here. I'm not having any luck. But
at Too Free Mike, follow me if you haven't already. I'll follow back all freedom lovers of all stripes. And
that's the wrong one.
Town Liberation.
No, this is the right one right here. This is working. Nice. So that's everybody. That's all the stuff. I'll just leave that up. You can read that at your own pace.
I love that. That makes it look like a news broadcast or something. I've always been a fan of the little whatever this is.
I should put some scores in there or something.
Right.
Get some interest. So tonight the topic is the language of local liberty, and basically conversations that connect us. When you're working on a movement, when you're working on grassroots organization, if you're doing that bottom-up rebellion that we've been talking about, what language do you use? What terminology do you use? How do you all get on the same page? How do you communicate? So tonight we're going to talk about how to discovering the power of clear, common language and how that can ignite local revolutions and reshape your grassroots activism. So what we're going to cover is the role of communication in activism, localism, and grassroots organizing, how common language empowers communities to reclaim private property rights and individual self-ownership, strategies for using digital tools and decentralized messaging to build resilient free market communities, and then techniques, man, I can't talk at this hour of night, techniques to unite diverse voices under a shared activist lexicon for lasting change. So I like to do the stats to put it in context. Yes. And the stats I've got on this are approximately 70% of grassroots movements attribute their success to effective, clear messaging. And communities with unified activist language report a 45% increase in participation. Transparent communication and local activism boosts policy influence by 35%. Digital organizing that leverages common language sees engagement improvements of up to 40%. And nearly 80% of citizens believe accessible communication is essential for empowering community action. So 5 reasons why this should be important to you. It empowers you to articulate your values and challenge centralized power. It fosters stronger community bonds and amplifies local voices. It drives market-based solutions that promote economic prosperity and personal freedom. It equips you with tools to advocate for self-ownership and decentralized governance, and it enhances your ability to engage effectively in modern digital and grassroots activism. So this is one we've been working on for a while, and it's come up, and in different conversations we've had on the spaces that Mike does on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern. And so we wanted to kind of just approach this as one topic about how to communicate and how to all get on the same page. So the first thing I want to talk about is the power of words in local activism refers to the ability of carefully chosen language. So think of like slogans, speeches, everyday dialogue, social media posts to inspire, mobilize, and sustain community efforts for freedom and self-determination. So some examples would be, the rallying cries that underscore the importance of personal freedom.
Yes.
Using memorable catchphrases, developing persuasive messaging that frames cooperation as the path to self-governance and prosperity. So, Mike, how do you think that words shape local activism and influence the community's attitudes about the movement?
Well, words, first of all, are under they've kind of been systematically sabotaged, like the very language itself. And we can't, we kind of have to acknowledge that that's really where a lot of the sort of mental and psychological warfare happens, is with redefining words that we're all familiar with, right? I mean, we were, those of us who were observing, which I think everybody listening to this was observing, how the definition of just the word vaccine has changed in recent years for obvious reasons. But the fact is we have to recognize that the shaping and reshaping of the definition, the meaning of words, is a very dystopian tactic. It really reinforces the existing power structure, because it causes those of us who have to use those words, to paraphrase Philip K. Dick, a quote I often use and a thinker I often refer to in the subject, it really is a way to control the people who have to use the words. If you change the definition of those words, then all of a sudden people are speaking one thing, but you're hearing something else, and vice versa. So language is, obviously it can't be overstated how important it is. And I think the main thing about our local activism is that we have to identify the language that unifies, right? The language of the principles that unite us, even though we come from very different particulars, right? We come from very different kinds of backgrounds, but we're all, those of us who are sensitive in any way to individual liberty and are aware of sort of the dystopian moves that have taken place just in this decade so far, are going to be following ideally the same principles. And so we need to find language that resonates and articulates those principles, because that's how we truly find each other. And we find people that are actually willing to work on the same, like for the same end, regardless of our various particulars, right? I'm probably the most particular person that one can meet as far as my beliefs go. They're very extreme. I'll be the first to admit that. But that doesn't mean that we can't find common ground. As long as we are really articulating those principles well, we should be able to find common ground enough to lock arms and pursue a local objective. But it takes effort. It's not something. It's something that's being deliberately sabotaged. I mean, they want us at each other's. They want us divided. They want MAGA and liberty and libertarians at each other, competing with each other. Oh, these guys! Look at what's happening. We can't. They want us at each other's throats. They want us divided. That's a divide and conquer tactic. It goes back to the first global dystopia of Rome, and even before that, really. I mean, it goes well back into human history, and it's something that we have to consciously counteract in our language. So it's kind of a lengthy intro, but it's important that we kind of set the stage as to not only why it's important, but what we're really up against in trying to form that common language.
Well, well said. And yeah, so some ways to put this into action are to, create a community approved lexicon of terms that embody your movement. Use media to spread empowering messages and success stories. Encourage leaders to use consistent language that reflects community values. Use online platforms where activists can share and refine key messages. Regularly evaluate messaging strategies and update them based on community feedback. And organize workshops for effective public speaking and how to craft effective messages.
Yes.
Anything you want to chime in on there?
A couple things. First of all, having an online lexicon, I guess, that's a good word for this, is actually really, really good. And it's something that I alluded to in the spaces on this last Tuesday. I think we really have to start telling our stories, right? Because even just, telling our own narratives about what we're trying to achieve in our specific local area, put that online. I'm thinking of creating like a lexicon where we could all just sort of like a shared drive where we can all just add, our latest stories, our latest stuff. And we do that a little bit on the spaces, but there's so much more detail that people could get into to tell their stories about what it is they're trying to achieve. And in telling that story, you kind of create that lexicon. So there's a context to the words that we're using, like, we are pushing back on this ordinance that restricts the amount of water we can collect from the rain, or restricts some other form of restriction of private property that shouldn't exist, some other infringement of our individual liberty in there. And we're pushing back on that. And here's why. Because that gives context to the language we're using to describe our principles, like our principles of individual liberty. Well, what does that mean? I go out of my way to explain the difference between liberty and freedom. Freedom can be essentially unlimited, and therefore, there's no boundaries, and it kind of leads to almost like a social Darwinism if you don't add the context of liberty, which is mutually respected freedom. But you see, storytelling will enable that. So I think having an online lexicon is really good. And also you mentioned something that's really, really important. And this is something that I think is I can appreciate the irony of this sentiment, but libertarians are obviously terrible at getting along with each other, let alone anybody else, right? The irony of this is not lost on me, because the reality is we're the ones with the best principles. We should be the ones leading the way in restoring civil discourse. And we've touched on this a couple of times in our podcast. I touch on it every now and again on the X Spaces on Tuesdays. But civil discourse is a sort of a poison to dystopia, because once we figure out that we can disagree and get along, or even better, we can find that we maybe don't disagree enough on certain issues to the point where we can't work together towards a liberty objective, that civil discourse unlocks that. And that is the last thing, the existing power structure, as I call it, the dystopians, because it's global. It's not just the United States, or it's all over. And we touch on that on Tuesdays. It's all over. They're all following the same dystopian playbook, but they rely on us not having civil discourse. That's why civil discourse has been, if you think about it, it's been so heavily discouraged. Like if you even entertain the idea of a dissenting point of view, it must mean you're complicit with that view, or that makes you a fascist, right? Or it makes you far right. Those are the biggest smears, but there are other smears too, racist, you name it. But the whole idea is to squash civil discourse. That serves the existing power structure. That's not conducive to a free society. A free society thrives in civil discourse. So as libertarians, we should not only be overcoming as much as possible our own differences, but leading the way towards civil discourse in the public sphere. If we could lead that way, then we can mount a viable defense, a viral defense against the dystopian ploy, again, of divide and conquer, keep us divided, and make sure everybody follows the exact polar extreme. Don't even entertain the idea of listening to the other side or any other potential point of view. And the other thing that's interesting about civil discourse is it brings out nuance, which of course in a society that's trying to make everything binary, well, you're either for big government or you're one of these Nazis, or whatever. Everything's kind of divided into like it's only one or the other, and you see it all day long on social media. I just experienced it early this morning on X. Oh, well, you Republicans are this. I'm not a Republican. It's like you guys are illegal. I'm like, well, actually, so are the Democrats, and so is the whole government. So, but that's the beauty of civil discourse, is it can bring that nuance to light. So I like the idea of not only having an online lexicon where we can kind of tell our stories and really refine that common language, but we can translate that into civil discourse of public events, areas where we can maybe say, hey, we are going to have this meeting on it. Now, we could train individually as libertarians and our allies gather individually to kind of train on what civil discourse even looks like. God knows libertarians need some work on that within our own circles, but then extend it to the public sphere. Make events out of it. That could be a really big thing also, and a really big part of Township Liberation. If you can gather your town together, have a town hall meeting where you just discuss issues in a civil discourse manner. I'm not talking about Robert's Rules of Order, which are berserk, but just civil discourse. Let's at least see what we can come up with in our local communities to meet with one another, differing points of views, and have that discussion. And that's also how we can kind of be on the offense when it comes to what my friend Eric, whose home I'm in right now, calls the language war. We can dismantle some of that sabotage of the English language, or any language really, where the definitions have changed. So again, that's another opportunity to kind of undo some of the manipulation that dystopian forces have imposed on us, specifically with the definition and meaning of words.
So some mistakes to avoid: overcomplicating language to the point of confusion, which apparently I was guilty of right now because Terry had to put up on the screen. Okay, I had to look it up. A lexicon is the vocabulary of a person, language. Sorry, what?
That was a great word, lexicon. I love it. Yeah.
All right. A lexicon is the vocabulary of a person, language, or branch of knowledge, like legal, medical, or political. David added he prefers uncivil discourse. Well, you'll like X then.
And I was going to say, you love X, don't you?
Yeah. And then Terry says Mike's favorite word, dystopian, very bad or unfair society in which there is a lot of human suffering and misery, often due to deprivation, oppression, terror, or environmental destruction.
That's pretty fair definition.
Yeah, it's spot on.
Yeah, I was going to say that's kind of accurate where we are right now across the world.
And then another mistake to avoid is relying on jargon that alienates potential supporters. So to me, that's another really good one, because I'm an anarchist and people think that anarchy means chaos. And really it just means no or less rulers. So I don't want centralized government. I want voluntary local governance where you can live wherever you want to live and participate or not participate in any sort of governance. If you want to live off the grid, live off the grid. If you want to live in a very hands-on, highly regulated community, you're welcome to do that. But just the having no option but centralized government is what I'd like to get away from.
Yes. Very good.
And then ignoring the historical context of activist language. That's funny because the America First one of the things that the left likes to say about America First is that started with like a white supremacist movement. And so being aware of where those came from is interesting. But the other interesting one is MAGA, Make America Great Again, was originally used by Reagan, but also was used by Bill Clinton. So,
right.
It's been on both sides of the aisles, and, Trump just made it his own, really.
FDR had a version of that, right? I mean, come on. It's not unique to the right.
And I do love HOA governance. I technically don't live in an HOA. I live in what's it called?
Community association, right?
Community association. That's what.
Yeah,
it is.
that's all over Orange County here in California as well. Community associations, I think, are somewhat superior to homeowner associations insofar as you have a little bit of accountability, and you can attend your community association meetings just like you can attend your city council. It's just a more regionalized version of a city council. I don't have as much of a problem with those. HOAs out here in Orange County at least tend to be pretty oppressive. I'm not a big fan.
And Terry said, make sure you share. So I'll put that up again.
Yeah.
And then some other mistakes to avoid: allowing divisive language that fragments your community, failing to adapt messaging that changes with local issues, and using slogans without grounding them in actionable policy proposals.
Yes. Hope and change. Ambiguous. Yeah. All get out.
All right. Well, I'm excited about this one. The next one I want to talk about is historical language of liberty movements. And one of the things I love to pick your brain about and hear, your depth of knowledge about is, the history of these movements and where a lot of this came from. And so I wanted to hit you with some examples that I came up with about, some great rallying cries of liberty movements, and just get your impact. So sure. The first and, probably one of the greatest is no taxation without representation. Obviously, that was a rallying cry of the American colonists that highlighted the injustice of being taxed by a government in which they had no political voice.
Yes.
So just jump in wherever you want on these.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays, isn't it more like no taxation and then forget, I don't care about representation, one or the other, just no taxation, or yeah, as we commonly call it, taxation is theft. But yeah, that's all good stuff.
And then give me liberty or give me death. That was the declaration from a 1775 speech by Patrick Henry, encapsulating the resolve for absolute freedom and resistance to tyranny during the American Revolution. Live free or die, a motto that emerged from revolutionary sentiments and later was adopted as New Hampshire's state motto, symbolizing the uncompromising value of personal freedom over a life of oppression. E pluribus unum, which translates to out of many one. This phrase reflected the unity of diverse colonies coming together to form a single nation, a concept that continues to inspire local unity and self-governance. Remember the Alamo, a battle cry from the Texas Revolution that became emblematic of the sacrifice and courage in the fight for independence, which galvanized local resistance against overwhelming odds. Liberty, equality, fraternity, the slogan of the French Revolution that captured the revolutionary ideals of personal freedom, social equality, and communal solidarity. And those influenced global movements for democratic rights. Viva la Revolution, a spirited exclamation during Latin American independence movements and later in revolutionary contexts, symbolizing a collective call to overthrow oppressive regimes. Not our cup of tea, but a famous one is Workers of the World Unite.
Right. Oh, yes.
The Communist Manifesto.
We need to pull up. Yeah, we can learn from the commies. We can. I mean, not our thing at all because of the collectivism is contrary to liberty at the most fundamental level. But we can learn a lot from these guys.
Yeah, and that slogan's been used to mobilize the working class globally by emphasizing solidarity and the shared struggle against exploitation, influencing many liberty movements. And finally, Join or Die, which was originally a political cartoon by Benjamin Franklin. I think people don't realize like how well Benjamin Franklin used words and media. You know, he bought newspapers and distributed his words across the colonies. That slogan in particular stressed the necessity of unity among the colonies for survival, later serving as a unifying call for collective action against external threats.
Yes.
Any thoughts on those?
Well, most of those are great. I'm going to add a few things because in my travels, I've hung out with a gentleman named David Kidd in the 90s, who was a instrumental figure in the Students for Democratic Society, which were straight up socialists, right? I learned a lot from hanging out with far lefties, right? And I learned a lot that I think we can adapt for liberty purposes. But I mean, all those slogans are great. Even Workers of the World Unite, because we could tweak that for our purposes, right? Governed of the world unite, against their governments. But I also like there's a couple slogans that were absolutely left-wing slogans up until recently, really. I mean, up until the 21st century, these were considered left-wing sentiments, left-wing slogans. And the biggest one from the 60s and 70s was, question authority and think for yourself, essentially a dual slogan. How far have the left gone from those ideas and those sentiments? I mean, that's our stuff now. That's liberty and, MAGA sentiment now. Question authority. That's our battle cry now. Think for yourself. That's our battle cry now. Don't trust the experts. That's us. Can you imagine? I mean, we're just old enough to remember that it was the left that questioned authority at one time. It was the left that didn't want a surveillance state, that was concerned about civil liberty. It was the left that encouraged you to think for yourself, not trust the experts, and actually ask questions of those in power. Ask questions of the narrative that's being shoved down your throat, that was suspicious of authority rather than embracing of authority. And it became something entirely different in the 21st century, to where now it's really an inversion almost of that. So those are slogans that should belong. Speaking of slogans, those are slogans that should belong to us now. It should belong to the Liberty MAGA coalition. It doesn't belong to the left anymore. They can't claim that anymore, except for the few. And there are actually more than a few, except for the old school left, who still hangs on to that and wonder what the heck happened to their side of the political spectrum. They still embrace it. So that to me is where I can maybe reach out to folks on the left even still and try to grab them. But even the whole idea of a left-right spectrum, of course, is, as you and I have talked about many times before, is very outdated, to the point where it's not really even worth couching things in those terms, except insofar as it's still how people think. But we need to kind of help evolve them out of that linear thinking. But these are all powerful tools. Slogans are great, but there is something to reclaiming things and repurposing things that have been clearly abandoned. In particular, those old left-wing slogans that should be ours now. Why not claim them? I mean, heck, the word libertarian actually came from a left-wing movement at one point. So we kind of already appropriated that word. So why not appropriate some of the slogans as well?
Yeah, and we have a lot in common with the MAGA movement, but at the same time, the right isn't known for being nice about civil liberties. They're more about the police state and the war machine. And so I've been fighting with people a lot this week on X about Gaza and the potential occupation of Gaza. And then the week before that, it was about getting rid of the immigrants, rounding them all up and shipping them out. And what I keep trying to tell people is, you know, on the surface, you can make a case that both of those make sense in the current climate. But what our side thinks about is all the times they said, well, we're just going to round up this one group of people, and then they expanded well beyond that. And you know, that they use the war on drugs to militarize local police forces, and now they, you know, kick your door in and shoot your dog even if they're at the wrong house sometimes. And
That's right.
So it's the overreach on that concerns us.
Sure. It's also, you know, it's so funny that Milton Friedman said that there's nothing so permanent as a temporary government program. And that's the part that I think, you know, we have to be the voice of reason, right? We have to be the counterbalance to that. It's like, first of all, take it for what it's worth. Maybe I'm being too forgiving, but I think all the talk about Gaza and what I think half of what Donald Trump has said the last couple of weeks has been largely just posturing to just to throw everything off, right? I don't think there's any part of he's not listening. Doesn't seem to listen to the people that once would have convinced him that actually occupying Gaza would be a great idea, like the Mike Pompeos of the world, and the Boltons, and all those war pigs. But I think nonetheless that we have to be the counterbalance. Like, maybe this is not such a good idea. There's a counterbalance that we can represent, almost like in an Aristotelian sense, where, okay, get rid of people that have maybe committed, have already started a rap sheet after coming here illegally. Oh, sure, okay. Let's see if they're stealing, committing crimes with victims. Okay, that seems like we should prioritize if we're going to talk about illegal immigrants. Let's focus on the ones that have actually done some damage, and then let's focus on amnesty for the rest. That would be kind of a more libertarian type of thing to say, right? But at the same time, I get the sentiment, right? So we have to, again, kind of be willing to not necessarily put aside our values, but not let those particulars necessarily get in the way of a healthy discussion in a civil discourse manner. Like, okay, that's great. So you're going after so and so, and you're putting Kristi Noem up on TV to do whatever the heck it is she's doing in New York or whatever. Okay, let's dial some things back at some point and make sure that we don't create something that is going to be even worse if and when some other clown gets the power. And I think that's the other really important lesson that libertarians can bring to the table is what happens, and you say this all the time, Free, what happens when your worst political enemy has the power to do what your guy or gal is doing, with all those levers of power? Like, what if they get to do that next? So the idea to me has always been, as I say often on my space, it's like, whatever we do, let's make sure that we're burying power rather than trying to just seize it. Let's try to remove the power. Let's try to take away power from a centralized federal government and return it to not just the states, but as we talk about to the township level. Like, let's give as much power back to the lowest levels of government as possible, and remove as much power from a centralized federal government, because that is, to me, that's the more frightening implication of some of these actions. Like, okay, well, a government that can kind of come in and do this with this group, what if some other much more nefarious set of individuals, administration, comes in and decides, we're going to do that to patriots, we're going to do that with people that we consider having unacceptable views, as Justin Trudeau might say. So those are the things it's almost like our responsibility to present that counterbalance, so that people don't go, who would otherwise agree with on a number of other things, don't go off the deep end on some of the things that are maybe have pitfalls spelled out pretty clearly.
Andy's here. What's up, Andy?
Andy.
And David, really articulated it well. Don't give the power to your friend that you wouldn't want your worst enemy to wield. So very good.
Very power. Don't seize it.
So I want to talk about communicating and defining values. And I'm going to talk about this from the perspective of our movement, because we understand it better. But communicating and defining values involves articulating the principles of community empowerment, in our case, local autonomy, decentralized governance, through clear, accessible language that resonates with your community. So some examples would be, framing community self-ownership and local decision-making in everyday terms, creating local narratives that emphasize market-based solutions and entrepreneurial success, developing a common lexicon that reflects the ideals of decentralized power and personal freedom. And like I said, I've been working on this for a while, and part of the inspiration of this was our friend Marty, who is an activist in Scotland.
Glasgow, Scotland.
And is getting a really cool movement going there, and has really got you and I fired up. And, we were talking about, the terms of our movement and how it's hard to articulate them to people that are new to the movement. And so I put some terms together, and I've been chipping away at it and trying to come up with that common lexicon that I've been talking about. So I'm going to hit you with the term and the definition, and feel free to jump in wherever you want.
Sure.
But so we talk about self-ownership and individual empowerment. So one of the key terms there is autonomy, and that's the capacity to make informed, uncoerced decisions about one's own life and actions. Then personal sovereignty, the concept that individuals are the ultimate authority over their own lives. Self-determination, the right of individuals to control their own destinies, free from external control. Individual empowerment, enhancing a person's ability to make decisions and affect change in their own lives and community. And then self-legislation, the process by which individuals or communities create their own rules or laws based on mutual agreement. Anything there jump out at you?
Well, a lot. Obviously, personal sovereignty, I think, has the great common thread that runs through all common law countries. Everybody from every country that shows up on the X Spaces on Tuesdays, Scotland, Wales, England, New Zealand, Canada occasionally, and Nigeria, all common law heritage countries which at least have some degree of common law. And sovereignty, personal sovereignty, echoes that. I think it was the great Neil Oliver, Scottish commentator, who got booted off GB News. Brilliant. If you ever want, actually, I recommend you follow him at the Coast Guy on X. He brought something to my attention that I didn't realize, but the whole notion of the British government was that, and the monarchy was that really that the monarch was the first sovereign in a nation of sovereign individuals. I didn't know that. I just thought it was like, oh, the king. We're Americans. I thought, everybody just bows to the king or the queen, and there's no freedom. Well, eventually it became that, but wasn't the original intention, and that's why common law was so important, and why it's buried in practice in the United Kingdom, and certainly here as well. Even though we inherited the same legal system, certainly buried in Canada, which supposedly has the same system. But the point being is, we are a nation, and we are just as much a nation of sovereign individuals. So I like that idea of individual sovereignty. That's something that we can share across all common law countries, and even countries that maybe don't have that tradition, but are drawn to it. That's a fantastic term to use. And what was I think there's also something you really stuck out. I got kind of distracted by that, but what was the last one that you mentioned? Because that's also really on point.
Self-legislation.
Yes. Okay. Great. I like that. I like that term too, because that really implies township liberation. That implies our local township. The Surf City Republic, for example, or the Conch Republic, can legislate for our own purposes right here in our little community, our 200,000 population town. There's no reason why we can't have the bulk of the authority over our immediate area, our immediate vicinity, our township. Why the weight of local governance should be heavier than any other type of governance. So I like that. I like that term a lot too. I think we should make that part of our lexicon. That'd be good.
I told you, I'm collecting.
Yes. Building
Chris jumped in and said the nomenclature of liberty. I'm lucky that I know how to pronounce some of these words.
Nomenclature. That is great.
Chris is one of my many friends on X that's smarter than me. So I'm always pleased when I read these off the screen without choking on my words.
Right.
David says, of course, he's brilliant. He's Scottish.
Exactly.
For those of you that don't know, for those of you that don't know, David is also Scottish. Moscrip actually in Scottish means yodeling in a kilt. So that's where Moscrip comes from.
I'm sure that's true. Scottish Gaelic would say that, right?
Yeah. And then Terry says those terms sound like terms of individual empowerment.
Here, yes.
That is what I'm going for. Yep.
And isn't that what the 10th Amendment of the original Bill of Rights, is that not what it's all about, right? I mean, if all of the original 10 amendments in the Bill of Rights, the 10th really reflects, to me, the spirit of the Declaration of Independence as it was written. That there is no government except by consent of the governed. That's like the passionate theme that runs through my veins. Is like any one of these clowns that presumes to rule over us, the only reason why they have that authority is because we, the governed, gave it to them. And I've seen it firsthand here at the County Board of Supervisors now multiple times, that the level of contempt they have for their constituents, which in the essence of this country is not just their constituency, it's their boss. It's for crying out loud. They work. Can you imagine if an employee had this much contempt for their employer? I mean, they'd be fired, right? I mean, talk about it. Just blows my mind how the arrogance that has evolved among our so-called elected officials that think that ultimately we work for them, when it's always been and always should have been them working for us, a privilege that we the governed should be able to revoke at any time, alter or abolish, as the Declaration of Independence says. But I'm preaching now, so I got to stop.
Preach on, brother, man. So libertarianism has terms that people have a hard time with, as well as some of the economic terms and free market principles. So one of the ones that all the time gets either misunderstood or people just don't know it at all is the non-aggression principle.
Yeah.
And the non-aggression principle, or you'll hear us say in shorthand, the NAP.
NAP. Yeah.
The non-aggression principle is the ethical stance that aggression against another person or their property is inherently wrong.
Yep.
So, just no aggression, no violence, right? Simple. Yeah. Then another one is spontaneous order. And this is another one that goes back to, anarchism, which is completely misunderstood. So spontaneous order is the natural emergence of order out of seemingly chaotic individual actions without central planning.
Right.
And then private property jurisprudence, the legal theories and practices that govern the rights and responsibilities of private property ownership. Voluntarism, another one that's misunderstood, but voluntarism is the belief that all forms of human association should be voluntary and consensual. So don't force it on someone else. Don't require it of someone else. It needs to be voluntary.
Doesn't it blow your mind that people can oppose that? Like, what basis do you go? No, coercion's okay. Yeah, absolutely. I should be able to have you bullied into doing what I want you to do. I can't bully you myself, but this dozen goons behind me with batons and they can bully you to do what I want you to do. That one bugs me. How that's not more widely accepted as an absolute truth.
Yeah. I jokingly say, I feel like I'm making freedom less popular. Like people are against freedom and voluntarism and, the non-aggression principle. It just blows my mind.
Yeah.
So another one is laissez-faire economics, which is an economic system in which transactions between private parties are free from government intervention. Any of those you want to expound upon further?
Yeah, laissez-faire. I love the expression, but of all the ones you mentioned, I think that one probably has the most baggage to the point where I just don't use it. Not that I have anything against it per se, but I think there's been a real historical misunderstanding. I mean, there's too many people and too many figures who are throughout history, kind of attacking that sentiment, right? And they pick out even the term capitalism. I'm not in a huge rush to defend because it's been tainted with a lot of stuff. It's not fair necessarily, but also the term capitalism was used by people who were quite a bit by people who were enemies of the idea of capitalism from the very beginning. So I tend to think we have to choose or pick our battles linguistically a little bit better to the point where I'm not going to die on the hill of defending the term capitalism or laissez-faire. Some of those other ones, though, and also the non-aggression principle. It's absolutely important to understand, but I think it's even more important to describe, because I think the non-aggression principle is more of a extended topic than like a term to throw around. Personally, I think, and it was built into the rightfully so, is built into the Libertarian Party platform, in the form in a very using almost Ayn Rand, if not almost using Ayn Rand language. Do not initiate force, fraud, or coercion. It was in the pledge that I signed when I joined the Libertarian Party in 1991. I do not believe in the initiation of force, fraud, or coercion as a means of achieving social or political ends. I mean, I signed that pledge. I believe in that pledge. I don't believe in the initiation of force, fraud, or coercion to achieve social or political ends. But I think what happens with the non-aggression principle is a great talking point for philosophically, but it gets blurry quick. Well, what is an initiation? And if you're defending yourself, against it, because I've heard this discussion a couple times now about the confirmation of particularly Tulsi Gabbard, who was a whistleblower champion of whistleblowers, who's basically, in order to get confirmed for the job she wants, pretty much had to lie through her teeth. At least that's the most forgiving take on it, to say, oh yeah, no, I don't believe in protecting whistleblowers. When of course that's what she's been about most of her political career. And I don't agree with all of Tulsi Gabbard's positions on things. I mean, definitely not 100%. Oh, she's right on everything, or even maybe even close, even 70%. But she's been good on this topic up until trying to get the gig. So is it a violation of the non-aggression principle to initiate fraud to get as a means of achieving a social or political, in this case political end? And I hear the debate. Well, is it initiating fraud? Because the surveillance state is fraudulent to begin with. So she's not initiating fraud; she's committing fraud in defense of the initiation of fraud. I don't want to get caught up too much in that. I mean, I'll wait to see how this whole thing plays out. But it's a great philosophical talking point. But it's also kind of like even the term capitalism to an extent. Certainly, the term laissez-faire. I tend to stay away from using the term non-aggression principle because it is a little bit too nuanced. It's too involved for just simple soundbite conversation. And while it's worthy of being a extended topic, it's still more philosophical than practical, in my humble opinion. And there's other things that can convey the same message probably a little more quickly and succinctly than that sort of nuanced term.
And let's see here. Chris has a funny comment here. I'm a father of a boy with 3 half brothers. Non-aggression is a learning curve around here.
For real, yes. Yeah. It's
I'm not gonna lie, it's one I struggle with.
Yeah.
The Mike Tyson, some people just need to be punched in the face. I struggle with that one a little bit. And Andy says some people have turned conformity into a profession, which I agree with.
Wow. Yes. It's very lively. It depends on it.
So I wanted to add, you mentioned laissez-faire economics, and I agree wholeheartedly with what you said. And I struggled with it, putting it in here, but at the same time, it's the perfect example of a term that's been co-opted and misunderstood when it's really a very simple concept of transactions between private parties being free from government intervention. So it's voluntarism. It's all of these good things. It's just been co-opted and misused and kind of turned into a bad term.
Let's contrast that with the term anarchy, which, you know, against both of us are basically forms of anarchists. But let's see what that's been. Look what's been done to that term. When the etymological definition of anarchy, if you break down the word, it literally means no rulers, as you said earlier, no rulers. Well, yeah, I can easily support that. That's what I mean when I mean anarchy. I don't mean no rules, because there's ways for society to have rules without having rulers. There's societal norms, especially when you look at it from a township level. There's ordinances and various things that a township can enforce. Everybody wants some degree of order and agreed upon conduct. It doesn't mean you have to have a ruler, right? You don't have to have anybody be the boss of anybody to achieve that. So I will more likely wrestle with, or not say die on the hill of, but I will more likely wrestle with people's understanding of a much smeared term, anarchy, than I would even the term laissez-faire or even capitalism necessarily. Because I think it's important. People, like, this is an important thing to educate people about. You know, having no rulers is not a bad thing. You can be your own ruler. You can work a society based on smart contracts, agreements, everything. People can sort of self-govern. There doesn't need to be some ruler that's going to be the boss of us. And in fact, that's pretty contrary to the notion of liberty, which is mutually respected freedom. So anyway, that one also stands out.
All right, so I passed through without taking too much damage on that. I'm going to call that a win and move on.
Yes.
And so we talk a ton about localism and decentralization. Localism is what you and I bonded on and launched this whole project that we're doing. And so, you know, I really wanted to touch on that and some of the key concepts that I think are misunderstood or not understood at all in localism and decentralization. One is micro-governance, which is the practice of decision-making at the smallest community-based level.
Yes.
Here's mine that I've been practicing saying to make sure I don't screw this up, but subsidiarity. So the principle that matters, the principle that matters should be handled by the smallest, least centralized, competent authority. Local autonomy, the degree of self-governance and independence that a local community can exercise. Here's one that Andy and I were talking about at, I don't know, like 4 a.m. on Saturday on Spaces, but decentralized federation. Again, people, when they think of anarchy and stuff, they say, well, that's chaos. That's nothing. That's just the wild, wild west, right? No. Right. Decentralized federation is a network of independent groups that collaborate without a central controlling body. And an example of that I used again at 4 a.m. on Saturday is, you know, the Gulf states having a Navy or a Coast Guard or something to protect their shores on the Gulf. You know, Idaho does not need to participate in that. Yes. So when you have the controlling centralized authority, Idaho's paying for that when that's not an Idaho problem, right?
So true. Yeah.
You know, and then finally, community self-determination, the right and ability of a community to make decisions independently of external authority. I gave you a ton there, Mike. Go wherever you want with it.
Well, obviously, each one of those examples speaks of decentralization, right? And also it speaks to the absolute urgent need for decentralization. We can't have a society that is so centralized, as you said. You know, people from Idaho are paying into something that the Gulf states need. People from California are paying for something that New England needs, or vice versa. It doesn't make sense to function like that. That's it's highly inefficient at best, and it's also not fair. So it speaks to the absolute urgent need for decentralizing as much as possible, and for establishing local governance and local strength to address those local issues and those local needs. But it's important. Like the other thing that all those examples, and I'm going to talk about them all at once because they're all brilliant. I mean, those are all well-rounded, thought out terms and ideas. But it also really highlights how there's no there's not a one size fits all approach that's going to work everywhere. And what's more is it highlights how they don't want problems solved. They want problems to keep happening. They want societal issues that are negatives to continue. When I say they, I mean those that want to maintain centralized power. And Terry pointed it out. I use this word all the time, but I'm sorry if it fits here. The dystopians don't want problems to be solved. They want problems to perpetuate so that they continue to be reelected, continue to get their budgets and their justification for imposing more and more taxes or printing more and more money, devaluing our currency to address these problems. That if there was a more localized power and more localized solutions and local attention focused on them, those problems would undoubtedly, in my mind, and I'd like to hear other people's opinions, but I think they would undoubtedly be solved. And if they get solved, if problems get solved, then the people will recognize we don't need nearly as much, if at all, centralized power. So it is in the best interest of those who are in power to perpetuate problems and point the finger at the other supposed, opposition for why those problems persist, when in fact it's just a theatrical game of mutual controlled opposition that protect and preserve centralized power. So everything that you mentioned undermines that, and that's why I have to say, pick one or say, I would say yes. All of those do what needs to be done to reestablish what was intended to be a free society.
All right. Well, Zach's here, so we should probably stop talking about him. Welcome, Zach. We'll start the show now.
Now it's time to start. Okay.
Yeah. And Andy made a great point here. Labels all have a marketing factor behind them and will be understood depending on the demographic. Rebranding some of the words is probably the only way. We've talked about that a bunch, and it's funny because one of the original conversations that Mike and I had was, I hate the word decentralization. And
that's right.
I mean, it sounds like something that like a proctologist would do to you or something. Like it's just a terrible, terrible word. And, so, I talk about just for the state. So that's a perspective issue, right? So we talk about decentralization, which, sounds like, some sort of military, overthrow of centralization or, taking it apart via legislation or whatever. I try to spin it to the opposite of that and talk about local power, right? Like we're more in favor of local power. We're in favor of handling anything that can be handled locally, not allowing top-down decision-making for things that communities can decide for themselves. So I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I do think like there's a term, and maybe the term triggers certain things, certain sentiments in certain people, like yourself with decentralized, which is like one of my favorite words. Obviously, it's like my last name on my handle for a reason. But I can also see what you're talking about. You have to be able to kind of, what do you mean by that? You have to get in the explanation phase. Like what do you mean by decentralized? What does that look like? Well, it looks like increased local power and decreased centralized power, decreasing the power of a one-size-fits-all top-down form of governance. So I still think decentralized serves as a good conversation opener. Like, what is it? What does it mean? I like it that it's provocative. I like that it triggers even negative emotion. But point taken, Andy said we do need to maybe rebrand some stuff. But I also, to that end, think that we can also take some of the catchphrases that once belonged to the political left, as I mentioned earlier, and start owning those. We are the question authority people. We are the think for yourself people. I don't see any reason why we can't kind of rebrand some old concepts that the left clearly abandoned and make them our own.
So I don't think it's a provocative word, but I mean, agree to disagree. But
Okay.
I would say a different way, like the baseball terminology. I'm a longtime baseball guy, and the baseball terminology would be, show the scouts all your pitches, right? So hit them with decentralization. And, like Andy said, if that resonates with them and that's provocative with them, great. But if it's not, move on to local power. Maybe they went to art school like me, and decentralization is like way too many syllables and, all of that. But, hit them with different terminology. And that's literally the whole idea of this is, to try to like give people ideas of the terms they can use to either understand these concepts or communicate these concepts to others, whether they're recruiting for their own movement or just talking to, friends and family about it. Right. So we're getting some like pretty specific questions. I'm going to hold on those for a few just to not derail where we're going here, because I did my homework and I want to use it. But please. Sean's here. What's up, Sean? Township Liberation is the answer along with free markets.
You're 100%. Here. That's the way to do it.
Mike, I think he omitted me. I'm gonna throw my name in here. Mike and Free are doing the Lord's
work. Yes, we are.
You're not paying attention. You're doing yourself a disservice.
Thank you, buds in reality.
I'm just gonna hold on a second. Let me just add my name.
edit that comment a little.
See if I can find my white out here and add my name in there.
I know Sean meant both of us, but the cool thing about I'm looking forward to like the rebrand. Where I think he's going to be talking more about music and stuff in his next iteration of his podcast. That's going to be fun. We do that offline, he and I, all the time, so this will be good.
Oh boy, I'm not even going there, Andy. I'll read the beginning of this, but this I'm going to skip the second part. But he said the marketing behind a word will depend on who it's being sold or used by. So,
True.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be different if you're talking to community organizers. It'll be different if you're talking to politicians. Be different if you're talking to youth. If you're talking to older people that have lived in this system for a long time. There's a lot of different people. I can see Terry laughing backstage, and she just keeps disappearing. So she read all of Andy's comment. I'll throw it out there. What the hell? So he added, take the word facial, ask a guy and a girl, 2 different meanings depending on the demographic. So yeah. So thanks for that, Andy. We had held it together for 1 hour, 8 minutes, and 20 seconds, and then Andy showed up.
I love that though. He's absolutely right, by the way. And let's not be. I mean, sometimes you have to be crass to get your point across. I learned that from our Scottish libertarian friends, right? Who have no problem being crass when it's appropriate. So yes.
Yeah, Sean liked that. So
yeah, of course he did.
Yeah, we can incorporate liberty in all things.
Yep, all the things.
You prove my point by not reading. I did read it, Andy. I'm not scared of you.
Not reading it out loud, I think is what he's saying. Yes, but you did anyway.
Yeah, I did anyways. And Terry, if anybody knows the number for 911, Terry is like in stitches back.
Is she beside? So, I know Terry.
He wants to thank you for giving you some real estate pointers, and
you're killing it in Indiana. I know you will.
Is he still squatting places, or was that Joe? I forget. There were a lot of squatting questions on one of the game shows. All right. So stop this censorship. Yeah. I get that a lot, shockingly, as an anarchist. People think that I'm censoring them. All right. So another one that's completely misunderstood, including by me, and I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around it because I had one very narrow view of it, and Mike has been enlightening me. But agorism is one. Right. And market activism that goes along with that. So
counter economics, got to have it.
So now I'm on the spot of doing the definition of agorism to an agorist, but
nice.
What the hell? and for those of you that don't know, I'm a reformed agorism phobic, so I'm reforming myself. But agorism is a social philosophy that advocates creating a society in which all relations between people are voluntary exchanges by means of counter economics, engaging with aspects of nonviolent revolution.
Yes.
Fair?
Very fair. Well, that's straight out of Sec 3's mouth. Yes, absolutely. That's fair. Yes.
Okay, cool. So some concepts in there. Yeah. Viva la agora. And,
yes. Go, Sean. Yes.
All right. So I wasn't going to go here, but I'm going to go here and see if I can do this off the top of my head. But agora is from the Greek word of like to gather as a community.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty cool
marketplace.
word.
Also, it's used interchangeably as marketplace. So we're talking about a free market. Agora is a free market.
Yep. Fair. Yeah. Hope your son feels better, Chris.
All the best, Chris.
So, all right. So some concepts in agorism that are important to know and really just, to me, the coolest of the cool of stuff we talk about, but black market activism.
Yes.
So that's an activist effort that operates outside of traditional regulated economic channels. And I feel like that's more important today than it's ever been with all of the digital control and, the mega banks that the government has allowed to be created or created on purpose. Mm-hmm. Another one is counter economics, the study and practice of economic activities that operate in opposition to state control.
Yes.
Agoristic strategy, a method of promoting social change by engaging in voluntary market-based exchanges. Underground economy, the economic activities that occur outside government regulation, often used as a tool for activism. And finally, voluntary exchange, the principle that transactions should occur only with the free and willing consent of all parties involved.
Yes.
To you, Mike, I know this is your playground here, man.
How rational is that, right? When you think about it, like it should be self-evident that this is kind of the way we need to do this. I'm going to go a step further and say that agorism, although it's definitely not nationalist, right? Because there's no real centralized power or even necessarily a identity that's required to practice. But I would say agorism in this day and age, in the 2020s, after they tried to lock us down and prevent us from meeting together in person with other human beings, they tried to literally take our humanity away from us. And when I say they, I'm not trying to be this, conspiracy theorist extraordinaire. That's a real thing. That's what they did to us all across the world. That screamed agorism as a response. And it is, I'm going to go ahead and say this, agorism to me in this day and age in 2025 is patriotic. I think it would be a patriotic move to practice agorism because of what our governments across the world did to us. And obviously the tide has turned a bit in certain countries, like here in the United States, turned a bit. We'll see how this all plays out, because there's still a lot of a resistance in a lot of circles, and the tide could still turn another direction, which is why we still need to be empowered locally. But that whole experience of a global dystopian lockdown over a glorified, probably genetically engineered flu is a lesson in why patriots in every country need to practice agorism, because their governments turned against them. And it's horrifically obvious in places like the United Kingdom, where they're literally arresting you for dissent, for expressing dissent online, while rape gangs and knife stabbings are rampant. The government is busy collecting dissenters and for expressing dissenting views from the government. Trudeau, who's finally agreed to resign, but whenever that actually happens is another story. But very famously said these people have unacceptable views because they're not submitting to mandatory vaccination in violation of the Nuremberg Code. God bless the Freedom Convoy of Canada and everything that they stood for again a demonstration of why we need agorism. There's no reason why all of those truckers and all of the people who were affected by it could have not just detached themselves from their nonsense governance and created a counter economy of transporting goods and services without any, without, like, come and stop us, right? I mean, come get us. There's way more of us than there are of them. That is the lesson of agorism. That is the lesson of the Silk Road and Ross Ulbricht. That is what will win in the end. That is our method for, and I know this word you don't necessarily like, free still to this day, that is our method of decentralization. It is through counter economics, and it is through agorism that we will taste liberty again. And I have been preaching for way too long. I'm going to stop now, but you got me going. That's my favorite thing. I think that's how it works. That's how Township Liberation will work, and it is an act of patriotism. So that's why, all my patriot friends, we'll get there. We'll find the balance. We'll do this with our sentiments, because they're far more aligned than you might think.
This is your jam. I knew I was setting you up. So.
You did that on purpose, huh? Give me preaching.
Yep. So the next one I want to talk about is economic empowerment and local entrepreneurship. And so in that, we have a micro enterprise, a small locally owned business that drives economic empowerment in communities, bootstrap economy, economic growth driven by self-funded initiatives and entrepreneurial spirit, community capitalism. Again, capitalism is a word that's been co-opted and misused. But community capitalism. Yeah, community capitalism, an economic system where local investment and market-based cooperation are prioritized. Local investment, the allocation of resources within a community to stimulate economic growth and development. And then for you, Mike, economic decentralization, the dispersal of economic decision-making powers to local levels, reducing reliance on centralized institutions.
Yes. Huge. If another lesson about the U.S. aid debacle is how, I mean, and we've talked about this before. We've had this kind of a discussion where we talk about the interdependence of smaller governing bodies on the resources, the stolen resources of larger governing bodies, namely the federal government, and how much interdependence there is, and how many people are essentially attached to and coupled with, depending and relying on, essentially the feeding trough of the stolen resources of the federal government, of tax dollars and whatnot. That's so commonplace, and it's so endemic to our society that we have to find a way to decouple and detach from that. I use that term a lot: decoupling, detaching, removing ourselves from it. And the only way to, again, this comes back to counter economics. It comes back to finding our own micro economy, developing our own, and really everything, micro resources. Again, agorism kind of speaks to this. Micro nuclear energy, individualized solar panels rather than these ridiculous solar farms here in California, or even more ridiculous wind farms. Put up your community windmill or set of a few windmills. Put up, solar panels on individual households and multi-unit homes, multifamily dwellings, commercial buildings and whatnot, to power those buildings and reduce the impact and need for a over-centralized power structure, and go micronuclear. You want to talk about green energy. But these are all things that can be done on a micro, highly, and I'm going to use the word again, decentralized scale. That's our way out of depending on centralized power and authority. That's our way of getting away from centralized government, and again, beginning the decoupling, which is not going to be an easy process. It's going to, even in the best of circumstances, it'll probably be a lengthy process, but it's an absolutely necessary one, because it's coming apart anyway. I don't see this over centralization being a thing anymore. I think people have already been, in the last week and a half, exposed to so much corruption, so much misuse of resources, that the faith in a centralized government to manage that the stolen resources of our tax dollars is going to hopefully be enough out the window with enough people that will pursue a smaller scale decentralized solution to decouple from all that nonsense as it starts to collapse anyway.
Yeah. So next is along the same lines, local economic development.
Yes.
So under that, I have community reinvestment, the practice of directing local resources and investments back into the community, localism economics, an economic philosophy emphasizing the importance of local production, consumption, and decision making, grassroots finance, which is a really cool one nowadays.
Yes.
Financial initiatives led by local communities, often bypassing traditional banking systems, economic localization, the process of strengthening a community's economy by prioritizing local production and consumption, and community wealth building, strategies aimed at creating sustainable, locally controlled wealth through cooperative and market-based initiatives. What do you like there, Mike?
Well, because I'm just, again, it's been like a while now, but it's really just starting to set in. Ross Ulbricht's freedom and what he did with the Silk Road kind of applies to what can be done locally. Localized versions of Silk Road, practical in-person versions of Silk Road. This is our way again out of the dystopian blob that has enmeshed itself into every facet of our society, all the way down to the individual level, let alone the local level. But all those scream to me of of being able to practice some form of local, unfettered, unencumbered market exchange, counter economics, in other words. So I like all of that. The other thing that I think is really kind of interesting, first of all, stepping away from centralized banking altogether is huge. I love that the Conch Republic had its own currency as well. I'm looking forward to developing a currency, maybe using the same currency here in the Surf City Republic. But the point being is, I see so much potential for just smaller scale versions of what we've grown accustomed to on the large scale. Was it you? I think it was you that mentioned like a sort of a micro stock exchange or a local stock exchange of local business activity. I mean, it's entirely feasible. Why would we rely on a New York Stock Exchange? There's no reason why we can't have other forms of exchanges like that, where people can invest in local businesses and so forth, and get some kind of return on that. When I say local or even regional, but it doesn't have to be this large, giant, multinational scale that gets celebrated on Wall Street. We could have our own micro version of Wall Street in our township. Why wouldn't we? There's just as much opportunity. I mean, maybe you can't amass the same amount of wealth per se, but you can certainly bolster and strengthen your local community and make enough yourself and earn some of the reward for strengthening your local community's economy. I love all. I mean, all these ideas are great and worth pursuing, and represent the decoupling that I talk often about, as far as separating from and detaching from the centralized power and wealth redistribution of a centralized government.
Yeah, I was writing about that, and we were talking about that.
We have talked about
I believe like Massachusetts has one. They're called local stock exchanges or regional stock exchanges. Yeah, it's a cool concept.
I think it's brilliant, and I've actually seen some of that. I know about different like lending opportunities and whatnot. People can become sort of a individual lender towards somebody who's starting a business, who's past the strictly startup phase but needs a little bit more to push through. Why not? There's contractual obligations of return with default options and so on. Why not set up that to where it's commonplace, at the local level?
Yeah, and some of these are getting a little colorful. We talked about, before some of you came in, we were talking about inclusive language, and everybody knows I am not PC. I am very far from it. But you don't want to alienate anybody that you can avoid alienating. And
Right.
so, like, if it can be avoided, it can be avoided. So there's a couple of words in there I'm not super comfortable putting on the screen, but so I'll read it. Zach, who is maybe the least PC person I know.
Me too.
He says the founders of agorism, by the way, were smuggling goods to subvert Parliament's taxes.
That's right.
And then Andy said, I do think the tides are turning. The issue will always be the weakest link amongst society, even though I do believe there are less and less weak links daily.
And it's a great point. Can I touch on that really quick? I think
Sure.
Really all it takes, Andy, is a tireless minority, right? I mean, even if like 70% even are still weak links, 30% being strong links will turn the tide for the 70% that aren't. That's almost the model of the American Revolution, right? There was not widespread support to detach and decouple from the British Empire. That wasn't widely accepted. It was sort of like, I'd say there was a bell curve, and the center of the bell curve of the colonial population was, let's wait and see how this plays out. I'm not going to take a side just yet. But all it took was the one side of the bell curve that was like, Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. And in many cases, signers of the Declaration of Independence prove this. Some of them did pay with their lives, certainly paid with their livelihoods, the vast majority. So, but look, they started this unprecedented, and I like to use that word, experiment in a society rooted in at least the principle of individual liberty, even if it was not correctly and widely applied as it should have been, and needed more additional revolutions to follow, individual rights revolutions. But the point being is it doesn't take much other than a tireless minority. It's still, in fact, I don't see it ever being more than a minority. But as long as that minority is tireless and works smart as well as hard towards the end of achieving individual liberty, I think it's doable. I can't help but be a little optimistic right now, like you.
Yeah, and Andy says, so it's basically reducing state government to a county or community level.
Yes.
It's reducing it to the smallest, the most local level possible. So
yeah, in a level where we can hold the people holding the power as accountable as possible. And the higher you go up the government chain, the less accountability there is, right? I live pretty far away from Sacramento, right? I don't think Free lives terribly close to Tallahassee. So I still want to take away power from those guys too, as much as I want to take it away from DC, which is the other side of the country from me. So yeah, proximity is important for accountability. So the more the power that I can ideally affect some form of change is going to be right in front of my face, something I can access. I can go to the county of Orange in Santa Ana, California. That's not that far of a drive. I can go to my local city council and do often. That's something that's accessible to me. I can go to a school board. I can access the local stuff. So that's where the power that impacts me and my household should be at the local level, not in Sacramento, not in DC. That should be minimal to none. Preferably none in the case of Sacramento.
Well, and it's more efficient too, and more cost effective. So centralizing costs money, where if you just do it yourself or you do it locally, it's going to cost less.
Well, back to that point. Yeah. Back to the point that they don't want to solve problems. They want things to be more expensive, and they want things to be inefficient. It serves their interest to be inefficient and to use money unwisely. And boy, are we discovering that in recent days.
100%. Sean says we can incorporate liberty in all things. 100%.
Right. Absolutely true.
Dis from earlier, Zach said he's proud that I did my homework.
He always does. A thorough homework. Like this is A+ student, material here.
Who knew?
Right. Maybe not actually school.
Township Liberation is the answer all along with free markets.
That's it.
All right. So next on my list is grassroots organizing terminology. So one of the things that you talk about a lot, Mike, is bottom-up mobilization. And that's a strategy where change is initiated at the local level by community members rather than it being imposed from above.
Yes.
Community organizing, the process of building a cohesive group of people to address shared issues and advocate for change. Grassroots lobbying, efforts by ordinary citizens to influence political decisions through organized advocacy at the local level. And then this one's come up a bunch in libertarian circles recently, but social capital, the networks, relationships, and trust that enable communities to work together effectively. Now, I also have some digital versions of this for digital organizing and online activism. Digital mobilization is organizing and engaging community members using online tools and platforms. Cyber activism is the use of digital platforms to mobilize support and drive for social or political change. And then e-democracy is the application of digital technologies to enhance and facilitate democratic processes. What do you think, Mike?
I think that entire last one you mentioned should have been spoken in a Kiwi accent, because that reminds me of Mark. Exactly, direct democracy in New Zealand is precisely what he's working on, and rightfully so. I think the opportunity is, again, it's hard not to be a little optimistic. The technology is providing, the average governed individual a lot more opportunity to participate in their own governance. Right, and more specifically, Mark's sort of not so behind the scenes objective in New Zealand is to get people not only engaged but realizing that the way their society is organized is at best outdated, if not downright corrupt, and in need of a major overhaul and simplification. And the revelation that's going to come out, I think, with what he's working on electronically in exactly the way that your last point describes, it's going to have a ripple effect everywhere. I'm certainly looking forward to applying it here in Orange County, California, to the point where people are going to realize that, as we've mentioned as a common thread in tonight's podcast, that the governments of the world are not interested in solving problems. They're interested in perpetuating problems. And when you look at how even your local government works, what it spends your money on, and so forth, and what resources are allocated, and how problems are perpetuated even at the local level, and how that scales upward, that's a revelation. I can't help but be optimistic that this is going to be the paradigm shift. This is a reset for liberty, not a reset for increased dystopia, as I think many institutions, multinational organizations have hoped for. This is a kind of a counter to that. I think this is the true reset that's happening, is when the governed they're waking up, even if it's just, again, a tireless minority of 30% or so. That's all it's going to take. 30% of the world's population don't pay their government's taxes to their governments anymore. We win. I can't help but be optimistic. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. I don't know. But we're going to have fun doing it. We're going to have fun pursuing it. It could get crazy. It could get really ugly. But man, not only do we have to do it, but I think we're going to have fun doing this.
Terry, I think, posted this today, and I was shocked that I wasn't on it, but it's beefmaps.com. I thought for sure Andy and I would be on there under Florida, but we were not.
No.
But it's a website that gives local beef farmer information for the entire nation. And what I thought was cool about it was it showed also, I don't know if it was when I clicked in or where it was, but the one closest to me listed what farmers markets they were at.
Yes.
And then you could order ahead. And, when you look into it, try to figure out a way that it works. Like, right. I live out and I live on the coast, but like in the least populated area. And so we have nothing by us. Like, I'm surprised we have a grocery store, to be honest, and a Waffle House, but like we have nothing else.
Civilization. Yes.
Yeah. So whenever I see something like this, they're like, drive to Tampa. And I'm like, no, thank you. And, But look into it and, give it a chance. I mean, there's some really cool stuff. So thanks for finding that, Terry. Terry does a great job with stuff like
She
that.
does. I mean, she's a research guru in her own right. And I think, Terry, what you're kind of uncovering with that, I didn't get a chance to really get into that today, but I do want you to know that I see the potential of creating a network. I guess it reminds me of my friend Richard from Wales, who's in rural Wales. I mean, why not have not just a national, but a global network of local farmers? Maybe there's something. I mean, like we could do. There's no reason why we can't scale down the costs of local farmers and start to detach and decouple from big agriculture. To the point where we're getting we're everything like some sort of online version of a farmer's market. I mean, why wouldn't we be able to do that? I know they tried to do several different online versions of online grocery type situations. There's a lot of the grocery market chains have an online component where you can, essentially get your groceries ahead of time and have them picked for you, and you pick them up. It seems like we could do the same thing on a much smaller scale. And create localized farmers markets to the point where maybe we could even get the prices to be somewhat competitive, to where the local farmers can afford to charge less because they're doing much greater volume and they're selling much more of their of whatever it is that they're growing, producing in terms of livestock and so forth. So I think there's a potential here to have a totally decentralized network of farmers markets, to where the prices can kind of come down. Because I'm a big fan, as you know, farmers markets. I went to one this last weekend. I posted about it on X. I'm like, these are just great. I mean, this is agorism personified, but it's also, I think it's healthier, and it's just overall a better way to go about producing and distributing food.
All right, so my next two categories here. First, I want to do community building and engagement. So the first one is social cohesion, which is the strength of relationships and the sense of solidarity among the community members, civic participation, active engagement by individuals in political and the social life of their communities, collective efficacy, the shared belief in a community's ability to achieve common goals, community resilience, the capacity of a community to recover from challenges and adapt to change, and then participatory democracy, a democratic system in which citizens have direct involvement in decision-making processes. And then I also want to talk about protest and civil disobedience.
Yes.
So nonviolent resistance. I realize like some of the younger people probably don't know these as well as us. So I wanted to do these. So nonviolent resistance, a strategy for social change that rejects physical violence in favor of peaceful protest. Civil disobedience, the active nonviolent refusal to obey certain laws or commands of a government as a form of protest. Disruptive protest, actions intended to interrupt or disrupt regular activities to draw attention to an issue. And then direct action, immediate, tangible actions taken to address perceived injustices without relying on established political processes. Where you want to go with this one, Mike?
Your last few words there, relying on established political practices. That's the most important thing we can start doing, is stop relying on established political practices. They have failed us, brutally failed us. The last 4 years have proven that our established political practices have not only do they no longer serve us, they work against us. And those in power, whatever you want to call power, those so-called elected officials, or so-called leaders and representatives, are part of that established political process that has not only failed us but turned against us. So whatever we can do to detach, decouple, and no longer rely on established political practices, it will be a step in the right direction. We need to do what the founding fathers did, do what the abolitionists did, do what the suffragist movement did. Those are the three individual rights revolutions that I talk about, of the three that established our society rooted in individual rights, which unfortunately has been undermined through other forces like centralized banking, the Federal Reserve Act, income tax, and so on, while running parallel to those revolutions. This is the thing. We need to get away from established political practices because they have failed the governed. They have turned against and are now working against the governed. They are mechanisms of oppression of the governed. So all of those do that. Everything you mentioned does that. It detaches from the established political practices. And I celebrate that. That's exactly the direction we need to go.
All right. And so we talk about decentralized governance. Yeah. So some of those are self-governance, the ability of a community or group to regulate itself without external intervention, distributed decision-making, the process of making policy decisions across various independent groups, local referendums, direct votes by community members on specific local issues, bypassing centralized decision-making, polycentric governance, a system where multiple governing bodies interact to make decisions rather than one central authority, and autonomous zones, areas where communities self-organize and operate independently from the state. And then I also wanted to add some political economy and market-based solutions. So public choice theory, the study of how public decisions are often made, highlighting the influence of self-interest in political behavior. And then economic liberalism, a belief in free markets and minimal government intervention is the best path to economic prosperity.
Absolutely.
Market fundamentalism, the ideology that free market mechanisms are the primary drivers of social and economic progress. Spontaneous market order, the natural organization of economic activities emerging from individual actions without central control. And then I'm going to drop some Adam Smith here.
I know.
The invisible hand mechanism, which is Adam Smith's concept that individual self-interest inherently benefits society through market operations. That was a ton there. Where do you want to go with this, Mike?
Well, that invisible hand is still very much a thing. People don't like that, though. So even though I absolutely think that is the common theme behind everything you just mentioned, the fact is, people still have this thing where they want to somehow call that into question. But how is that even questionable? I think what we're looking at in terms of terminology, since this is a podcast primarily about communication and how we communicate these ideals, and these are all pretty important and fundamental free market concepts and free market ideas that you're bringing up. But I think particularly when it comes to the invisible hand, maybe because Adam Smith's the oldest of the bunch, I think maybe this is why that gets a bad rap among even people who are sort of centrist or wouldn't necessarily know, like it kind of scares them. Most people think that there is a certain nobility to regulators. I think it's because we kind of grew up in an environment where we were supposed to respect authority, listen to those that are regulating you, and this is how education was run. So I think there's a natural inclination to sort of trust in those in authority, the regulators, and even though it's pretty obvious when we break it down that they have the same flaws as anybody, same potential character flaws as anybody who is buying or selling or participating in the marketplace. The regulators aren't any different or any more or less susceptible to corruption or more or less capable of initiating force or fraud or coercion, namely fraud. It's just interesting how people have this perception that we need to have regulators in place or else there'll be widespread abuse. When in reality, we just need, again, this is the Silk Road example. We just need to have some accountability to people selling, like that. The market evaluates. Like we can say, well, hey, this guy didn't give me what I paid for. This seller didn't give me what this is where they messed up. And as long as the participants have some degree of verification in that evaluation, markets really can govern themselves. Ross in Silk Road proved this. So that's the sort of hurdle that we have to overcome. But I won't get kind of going a long ways around to describe why I won't get hung up on trying to defend the invisible hand notion, even though I absolutely believe in it. And I think it's still very relevant today. And it drives all the other points that you mentioned. But we do have to at least meet people with their suspicion and maybe just gently, if necessary, call into question their reasoning that suggests that somehow regulators are made from morally superior material than sellers and producers in a marketplace. That's kind of like the big question is like, isn't it just about accountability? And wouldn't the market kind of support that accountability? We just need a transparent marketplace, don't we? Do we not? Do we really need to have regulators? Can't regulators be bought and paid for? Which of course they are. I mean, I can't imagine people really thinking that the government is free from corruption, but yet there's this sentiment, I think, within a lot of people that we need to kind of overcome gently at first. This idea that well, I need some form of government to protect us, don't we? Don't we need somebody overlooking this? When in reality, it's like, well, yeah, the market participants overlook the market. So it's an interesting situation, but I kind of gravitated towards Adam Smith because I think his invisible hand concept and so on, and just like laissez-faire, these are older terms, and they've had a much longer time in the English language to be beaten up and having a lot of unfair smearing and attachment of unnecessary baggage affixed to them. So again, pick our battles. Find the best way to bypass the preconceived notions that individuals may have about those concepts. That's kind of what we're talking about tonight, anyway. And I think it is actually really important because it's language.
So we're nearing the finish line here, and I just want to throw some more out there just to get them out there for anybody that is watching now or comes back and watches this. So some of the libertarian ideologies are also kind of hard to understand. And so I wanted to start with a voluntary society, a society in which all forms of association and exchange are voluntary and consensual. Minarchism, the belief that government should be limited to protecting individual rights and maintaining order. Anarcho-capitalism, which is the philosophy advocating the elimination of the state in favor of private property and free markets. And then I also wanted to talk about conflict resolution and mediation, because that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
So consensus building is the process of working toward a decision that's acceptable to all members of a group. Mediation protocols are structured guidelines for facilitating dialogue and resolving disputes. And then conflict de-escalation. Those are techniques used to reduce tension and prevent conflicts from intensifying.
Yes.
Any of those you want to jump on there?
Let's see. We've talked about this, maybe not so much you and I, but I've talked about this with like Donnie and Jeff Charles a lot about eventually just going as much as possible to private arbitration rather than engaging a government-run court system to really minimize reliance on a government-provided court system, because there's a inherent imbalance. And it's funny when you think of the symbol of justice is scales, but there's a real imbalance to the government-run court system, to where the alternative, which is just voluntary arbitration, and it can be private, it doesn't have to be government-run. There's a much better approach there, if you think about it in terms of conflict resolution, and to use 18th century language to address your grievances. So I like that one. I think that's not utilized or even thought of quite enough. We talk about jury nullification, but why not just nullify the whole idea of a government court system in favor of something that's voluntarily a private arbitration agreement, and organizing our dispute resolution along those lines rather than using a government system, which is generally inefficient and horrific when it comes right down to it.
All right. And then the last ones here, I wanted to talk about technology, innovation, and basically the future of this.
Yes.
So some of the terms that'll come up are tech-enabled activism, which is the use of technology to facilitate, enhance, or transform activist activities. Disruptive innovation, which are new ideas or technologies that significantly alter established processes or industries, like Bitcoin did, or cryptocurrency. Hacktivism, the use of computer hacking techniques for political or social activism.
Right.
You mentioned our friend Mark in New Zealand. So digital democracy tools,
Yes.
online platforms and applications designed to promote transparent and participatory governance. And then activism apps, mobile applications specifically developed to aid in organizing, mobilizing, and communicating activism initiatives. And then again, I wanted to talk about the future of this, which is, where are the future trends in activist communications and technologies? So you'll hear, next gen activism, which is emerging forms of activism that leverage new technologies and methodologies. I think whoever figures those out and utilizes those best are the ones that are going to be successful.
Yes.
AI assisted messaging, the use of artificial intelligence to craft, optimize, or personalize activist communications. I may or may not know something about that.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Data-driven organizing. So using statistical analysis and digital data to inform and enhance grassroots campaigns. Anything you want to throw in there, and then we'll take the rest of the questions that are in the chat.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of skepticism, more than a lot of libertarians do, about artificial intelligence. But I think, in a sense, it's just too valuable of a tool to not want to have something to do with it, right? There's so much opportunity to really scale up as an out group, as somebody on the out, as people on the outside of the outside. Liberty people, and even the coalitions I've been forming and encourage people to form with liberty-minded MAGA types and whoever else might be joining with us at the grassroots level. We need all the help we can get, and if AI can kind of help elevate and escalate our messaging and our movement, and can make it a lot more efficient, so we can do a great deal more with far less than those who oppose us. Because let's face it, those that oppose liberty still have most of the resources. They still hold all the cards. I'm open to, and I'm a little instinctively hostile to the idea of artificial intelligence, but I think this can be really groundbreaking if used correctly, and it's open-bodied as opposed to a closed-bodied system like far too many of the AI systems we could mention off the top of our heads. I think that's something that and we talked about this offline. I think something we absolutely have to explore.
All right, let's do some questions here to close it out. What are your thoughts on an insurance-based society?
Obviously, insurance, particularly as it exists in the United States, is kind of a horrific thing. Like, it's really kind of a racket. But at its fundamental level, at its conceptual level, it's actually really promising. But it would have to be completely restructured from what we're familiar with, and particularly in the United States. United States insurance is an absolute racket. And so it would require a PR makeover. I would even try to use maybe a term other than insurance. it's just so bad, and so many people are rightfully frustrated with it. Historically, that's a lot to overcome, just in the nomenclature, as somebody said earlier.
Yeah, so this is something I talk about a lot and advocate for, and like you said, it's such a touchy subject because the government's taken so much control over our insurance industry that it's ruined it. And so when you say, well, insurance could handle that, people are like, oh, that would be terrible. And it's like, like
rightfully so, though. I mean, this is unfortunately, it's been poisoned, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. So I would think about it like we rely on government for things that insurance companies should handle. And, FEMA would be one of those, right? Like, and then it never shows up. So it can't be worse than that, right? And so, when you think about voluntary association and voluntary markets, you would do business with companies or individuals that belong to associations that you trust. Right. And whether that's insurance or trade organizations or nonprofits or whatever form that takes, you would use who they associate with to determine whether you trust them, whether you want to give them money, whether you want to get into a contract with them, those types of things. So you have to disconnect the disaster that government has made of most what should be private industry and likely is turned into some sort of corporatocracy or, monopoly. But, think about it in terms of, like an escrow account, like using an escrow account to make a deal, right? Like you wouldn't just find somebody off the internet and make, a multi-$1,000 deal just based off of trust. You'd want to have some sort of organization that would help mitigate risk in that situation. Exactly. And that'll never be the government.
Right. Absolutely.
And then Andy asked, who would regulate the money as in the value of it?
Not the Federal Reserve. No centralized bank, would do that. Ideally, it would have an intrinsic value. Ion Digital. I might as well throw this out there. There's some guys I'm paying attention to. One of them lives right here in Huntington Beach, and they're working on a type of cryptocurrency that has that is effectively rooted in the value of gold, silver, and other precious metal mines. And I think there's some compelling idea behind blending cryptocurrency in a blockchain format with something that holds intrinsic value. But the trick is there's no governing body, there's no bankers, there's nobody just sort of assigning the value out of a whim, and making sure that currency, whatever it is, has limits to it, where you can't just print it. That's the blockchain component. You can't just print more of it on a whim. It has limitations. It has methods of preserving its value built into it. So it has to be something along those lines. But it's certainly not going to be in any of the fiat currencies of the world, of which all currencies, I think except one, are effectively fiat currencies controlled by a central bank. All that's got to be done away with.
Yeah, and I would say who controls the value of currency now, right?
Right.
So of course. The Federal Reserve is a private organization, so they can't be privatized. It's privatized now. If you want to say who's ruining the value of currency, that's the government. But so we've never had a problem representing value in forms of currency or stocks or some form of exchange. So I don't really see that as a problem, especially in the digital age with the adoption of cryptocurrency and all of the other things that are coming along with that, with the blockchain and other sorts of digital assets. So to me, that's not a big worry of mine. Like people will always be able to trade stuff. Like, you know, you don't use cash for the majority of the things you do. So some sort of digital representation of value should be a very easy problem to solve.
Yes.
Terry makes a great point to set notifications for Mike so you can join his space on Tuesdays at 3 p.m.
Yes.
The movement is happening worldwide, and it is very interesting. True story.
Yeah.
Excellent. And yes, let me just throw this up on the screen here. There is Township Liberation, which is what you were listening to tonight.
Oh, we're doing right
here
now.
Every Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern. There's Mike's book. I have the right slide deck this time. And the book is The Revival of Common Sense, The Case for Township Liberation. You can follow Mike at those two addresses. His personal is the 2 Free Mike. And then the Township Liberation is the handle at Town Liberation. And you can get this on Kindle. It's priced way too low at $5 on Kindle on Amazon. You can also get the hard copy. My YouTube is up and going.
Yes.
And so you can subscribe to that. Like it's doing pretty well. I think it's like we're getting close to 100. I think.
You've got quite a few people that are exclusive to that, right? They're following you just on YouTube. Yeah.
No idea. Really not paying any attention to it at all. So
seems that way. Anyway.
Yeah, I was dragged kicking and screaming into other platforms. So I got that going, and I've got the Rumble going. You can find those both in the original link for this. And we already did that. So yep. So we've hit our time, and we're wrapping up another one. Let's add Terry back here. And
hey Terry, thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Terry. Make sure you're following Terry Bats T76. I don't know why that's not on there, but I don't know. Maybe I should have out of order or whatever. But Bats T76. Follow Terry. I don't know. It was a bad day for technology. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know. I broke everything. So So thank you, Terry, and thank you, Mike. Anything you want to say in closing? Oh, there's the Rumble. See, she's awesome. There's the Rumble.
Yeah, she's on it. Terry Bass, always on it. No, just everybody follow Terry. Join us if you can on Tuesdays. I know it's kind of an odd time, middle of the day here in North America. It's noon my time, Pacific, but it's 8 p.m. We usually get our friends from Nigeria and the UK, and it's I believe it's 9 a.m. New Zealand time the next day. So we get a lot of great insight from Mark in New Zealand, and a lot of stuff going on for liberty across the world. It's worth tuning in if you can, even if you just listen, like it's on your lunch break or something. It's worth listening to the conversation because we have a lot of fun, and it's inspiring because everybody's on the same page across the world, and common sense is spreading across the world. That's the beauty of it. Is township liberation and people, getting their townships to decouple from their larger governing bodies. It's beautiful.
Andy said AI isn't closed. It's just the prompt-based models are, but anyone can API to the data sets and make their own models. It's just the apps that are out there that make it easier, but the data sets are all open for anyone to use. So I guess that must have been something you said there, but
it is. Yeah. When I think of closed body, I think of the language that's going into programming AI on the part of the tech giants. And Andy, we should have, I got to get Andy with Eric because he's talking that kind of language, that these high level intellects. I feel like I need to get you guys together because this is a big thing. I think AI has a tremendous potential, but it also is tremendous potential for destruction in the wrong hands, particularly government hands. So that's a whole topic unto itself.
And he said, great show. Thanks, Andy. And this is a huge compliment coming from Zach. He called us legend. So
I know. Wow, Zach. It's just running heavy with the compliments. Thank you, sir.
So that's it. Thank you, everybody. And really appreciate you showing up and everybody sharing this and everything. We've been having fun doing these. We've really spent a lot of time trying to create a roadmap to help everybody try to do this in their community. local power is better than centralized power. Making your community better is great for you, your family, your neighbors, something everybody can work together towards. It's a goal that shouldn't be hard to talk people into.
Right.
So we just want to give you the tools to do that. So appreciate everybody helping us out and showing up and asking great questions and making great comments. Appreciate y'all. And yeah, have a good night, everybody.
Everybody have a good evening.